Greetings, beloveds. This is Amy Karen Johnson, or Cosmic Earth Amy, and I am here with you today with not the third part of the three-part series that I began, but rather a slight departure from that series, where I would like to refresh the reason why I make these videos. And so it will be soft-spoken today, and I will also be reading a bit from a book, which I will show you in a moment. But first, I would like to say that those of you who have seen my videos before have perhaps realized that I don't just do ASMR. I first and foremost began making videos over 2 years ago about astrology and about my particular version of astrology. So beyond that, the reason I began getting so much into astrology, and before even making videos, I was doing sort of blogs about astrology, was because I have always felt a bit different, a bit like a black sheep, you could say. And through astrology, I felt recognized. I felt like at least I understood myself finally, and why I was different in some ways and not so different in others, but to finally have a way of describing or knowing myself was such a gift to me. It's been a while since I've spoken of diversity, but basically I think that the best way to help others to feel understood and accepted when they themselves feel different, as I did, is to promote and celebrate diversity in its many forms. There's a video I did perhaps 6, 7, 8 months ago, I think, and I've done others before that, speaking of diversity, and I think I mentioned 4 different levels of diversity that I think are really important for us in today's world. So briefly, those 4 levels were microbial. It's important to have a certain amount of diversity in our guts, in our soils, even for them to be fertile and produce the food that we all need to survive. Second, we need diversity within nature. We need a diversity of plants, animals, fungus, and we've found many cures through the diverse ecosystem of the Amazon, for example, the Amazon jungles, where there is a great amount of diversity. And so wherever we can promote that level of diversity, I think we will all benefit. Third is the level of human diversity, of which I alluded to when I started speaking about my love of astrology and why. That we are all different, and only by recognizing those differences can we truly know ourselves and each other. And finally, I believe that we need to be open to other sentient beings outside of this earth, or at least outside of who we normally recognize as human beings. I expect if you watch these videos, you might be open to that idea. It's certainly been spoken of a great deal before by people other than me. But that is the reason that I wanted to share this book with you today, Keepers of the Garden by Dolores Cannon. It's a wonderful book. It was written, I think, in the 80s, or at least the content came from the 80s. And it speaks about how aliens have, or extraterrestrials, however you would like to speak about them, have participated greatly in not only the evolution of humankind, but also the conception of humankind on this planet. So if that resonates enough with you that you're at least curious to hear more, keep watching. So the way that Dolores Cannon discovered these sources of information was through hypnosis. She found eventually a gentleman named Phil who did a past life regression with her and discovered lifetimes on other planets. So in this session, they're trying to understand more about how other beings, other aliens, other beings from other planets and so forth, galaxies even perhaps, have interacted with humans in the past. So Dolores asks questions and the answers come through Phil, even though they may not necessarily identify exactly as Phil did in his lifetime on Earth. Dolores prefaces this part by saying, "There have been many legends that have come down to us from ancient people concerning extraordinary beings, such as Osiris, Quetzalcoatl, who were supposed to have been gods, who came to the tribes to help them. Some of these were considered deities. I asked about this." So Phil answers, "We are relating events much previous to those you speak of. You have mentioned those who were not necessarily gods, but were individuals who were enlightened enough through contact with these gods, quote unquote. At that time, when one assumed the role of teacher of this level of knowledge, it was common practice to consider this person a prophet, or who is in direct contact with God, and so to elevate that person to a role much akin to a god himself. We would say these individuals were those who were quite attuned to their own energies, as well as those energies throughout the universe. Any who becomes attuned to that energy can appear to become quite elevated in stature above those surrounding. We would say these were merely individuals who were purveyors of the energies." Dolores asks, "According to the legends, I believe these, Osiris and Quetzalcoatl, etc., were thought to be people from outer space who came to live among the tribes and teach them." Phil answers, "Not that this had not happened, but we would not agree that these individuals were such. These were, again, messengers or purveyors of the truth and of the energies. There were many incidents of the individuals from other realms living among, if even for a short time, the people, and assisting and educating in those ways which were appropriate at that time. Many knew the true identities of these individuals, but oftentimes many did not. Some were indeed travelers from other planets. Others simply were from other planes of existence, not necessarily other planets, physically speaking. For there are many other areas of existence which are not physical in nature, and so it is possible to come from somewhere else without really being able to describe from whence they came. In other dimensions, there is no direction possible, as that concept does not exist. That is a three-dimensional concept, which, taken to the fourth or higher dimensions, becomes meaningless. So it would be accurate to say that many visitors simply were from other planes of existence and came down to this level to assist and give information. Dolores. Then were those like Quetzalcoatl physical people that were born into that tribe, or were they from another plane? Phil. Some individuals and leaders were indeed from another realm of experience. We shall not disclose the identities of these. It is not possible to do this at this time, as it is not that which is allowed. It would not be appropriate to single out any one individual as a messenger, or one who was not from Earth, and so forth, as the attention then would be focused on the individual and not on the information. Let us say it was necessary for this to occur for the information to be distributed. For were one to begin such a task as a, perhaps, shopkeeper, the sphere of influence would be quite limited in comparison to that of what the ruler would be able to accommodate. Dolores. Weren't there cases where these beings ended up being worshipped? Phil. There were indeed those visitations by the advanced ones, but this role was merely one of assistance, of a caretaker. The memory of these beings were held in high reverence at many times throughout Earth's history. They were revered and thought of as godlike in nature and were hallowed. There were many instances in the primitive cultures where there were visitations by these extraterrestrials to the oftentimes leaders of select tribes who were most capable of assimilating that which was occurring. Those who would have the least likely reaction of reducing the visitations to the deity or angelic level, and to recognize these as simply visitations and not dispensations. They would appear as a person, however, they were energy forms, which could resemble the appearance of being human, so as to not frighten. What type of information did they give the people? Phil. There was much discussion at the time as to how much information to impart to these individuals, and it was decided that a slow but steady ascent in consciousness, raising, would be more appropriate than to simply bombard or overwhelm these primitive societies with knowledge from the stars. So the information given was somewhat limited to very practical and useful areas, such as foraging and gardening, for examples. These were some of the first. As societies developed, it was seen that there were those who were keepers of the knowledge, a select few who were fully aware of the implications of these visitations. Then, through the gradual uplifting of consciousness in these individuals, it was possible to slowly broaden the discourses during the visitations to eventually include the positioning of heavenly or celestial bodies with respect to the planet Earth, and so it was eventually possible to school these primitive societies in advanced astronomy, for example. Dolores. Why was that so important that they know about the positions of the stars? Phil. Many people are quite aware of the influence of the stars on human events. It is now called astrology, but it was known to a degree far greater than it is now, and was much more accurately used. It could be calculated by noting the positions of the planets and the stars. The nature of the energies coming into the Earth made it possible to be able to predict the nature of that which was to occur. Dolores. Were there any other skills or knowledge that were taught these people? Phil. There were many different areas which were available at that time, many areas which would be considered surprising by today's standards for such primitive, quote unquote, peoples to have utilized. The practice of dentistry was taught, such that extractions were done with minimal discomfort, and extractions were then replaced after preparation and repairing of the damaged teeth. It was then possible to replace these teeth such that they would continue their living functions. This is now being learned once again at this time frame on this planet. I'll stop there. So, if you believe Phil's account, or at least past life account, of the history of planet Earth, astrology was handed to us by beings from other dimensions, other planes of existence, which makes a lot of sense to me personally after having thought about it. And there was another point spoken of there about the fact that there was a time in human history where we had more knowledge than we even have now, such as the use of astrology with greater accuracy. That's one of the reasons I really appreciate Vedic astrology. I think it's more what Western astrology was originally like, actually. And at that time, Western astrology benefited from that knowledge that was given to humankind. So I hope you enjoyed that. Again, was Keepers of the Garden by Dolores Cannon. She has other great books as well, but this is definitely at least one of my favorites, if not my very favorite. Thank you so much for joining me today. Namaste, beloveds.